On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're diving deep into 250 years of American history. But this isn't the sanitized version you learned in school. Forget the cherry trees and friendly pilgrims. We're talking about the raw, untamed story of how a scrappy collection of colonies clawed its way to global dominance. This is a story of blood, betrayal, and relentless ambition. So if you think you know America, think again. Let's start at the beginning, long before the Declaration of Independence. The first English settlers at Jamestown weren't noble adventurers building a new world. They were starving, desperate. So desperate, in fact, that archaeological evidence confirms. They resorted to cannibalism to survive the brutal winter of 1609, a period grimly known as the Starving Time. This wasn't a land of opportunity. It was a fight for survival, and the colonists were losing. The relationship with the native Powhatan Confederacy, initially one of cautious trade, quickly devolved into brutal conflict as the English relentlessly expanded their territory, pushing the native populations out with a combination of force and disease. As the colonies grew, so did the friction with Great Britain. You know about no taxation without representation, but the reality was far messier. The Boston Massacre, often depicted as a clear-cut case of British tyranny, was a chaotic street brawl that escalated. Tensions were sky-high, and radical groups like the Sons of Liberty used propaganda masterfully to turn public opinion against the crown. They weren't just patriots. They were expert agitators who knew how to provoke a reaction. The Boston Tea Party wasn't a polite protest. It was the destruction of private property worth millions in today's money. A radical act that pushed both sides closer to war. The American Revolution itself was less a united front and more a civil war. Nearly a third of the colonists, the Loyalists, remained faithful to the king. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and families were torn apart. The Continental Army, led by George Washington, was often on the brink of collapse, plagued by desertions, a lack of supplies, and disease. Victory at Yorktown was less about American might and more about a stroke of luck and crucial intervention from the French Navy, which trapped the British Army. The birth of the nation was secured not just by ideals, but by foreign debt and battlefield gambles. With independence won, the new nation faced another crisis. What kind of country would it be? Shays' Rebellion in 1786 showed just how fragile the new republic was. Farmers and veterans in Massachusetts, crushed by debt and high taxes, took up arms against their own government. They felt betrayed by the very revolution they had fought. This uprising terrified the Founding Fathers and was a major catalyst for scrapping the weak Articles of Confederation and drafting a new, much stronger constitution, one that centralized power to prevent such insurrections from happening again. The 19th century was the era of manifest destiny, the belief that America was divinely ordained to expand across the continent. This wasn't a peaceful settlement. It was a brutal campaign of conquest. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by President Andrew Jackson, led to the forced relocation of tens of thousands of Native Americans. The Trail of Tears, the forced march of the Cherokee Nation, resulted in the deaths of over 4,000 people from starvation, disease, and exposure. This wasn't just policy. It was ethnic cleansing, all in the name of progress and expansion. The Mexican-American War was another chapter in this saga, a conflict largely provoked by the U.S. to seize vast territories, including what is now California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. As the nation expanded, the issue of slavery tore it apart. The Civil War was the deadliest conflict in American history, pitting brother against brother. But even after the Union victory and the abolition of slavery, the promise of freedom remained unfulfilled. The Reconstruction era, a brief period of progress for African Americans, they used terror and intimidation to reestablish a racial hierarchy, leading to the Jim Crow laws that enforced segregation and disenfranchisement for nearly a century. The land of the free was for millions anything but. Entering the 20th century, America stepped onto the world stage. The Spanish-American War saw the U.S. acquire its own overseas empire, taking control of the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. The ensuing Philippine-American War was a brutal guerrilla conflict where American forces employed harsh counterinsurgency tactics, resulting in hundreds of thousands of Filipino deaths. America was no longer just a republic. It was an imperial power, playing the same game of global dominance it had once rebelled against. The Roaring Twenties were a time of great prosperity, but it was built on a bubble of speculation and debt that burst spectacularly in 1929, plunging the nation and the world into the Great Depression. This economic collapse exposed deep flaws in the American system and led to widespread suffering. The government's response under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the New Deal, fundamentally reshaped the role of government in American life, but it also involved controversial programs and a massive expansion of federal power. During the Cold War, the fight against communism led the United States down some very dark paths. The CIA, in its covert war against Soviet influence, engaged in operations that would shock most Americans. Operation Mockingbird allegedly recruited journalists to spread propaganda. Operation Chaos spied on American citizens who were part of the anti-war movement. And then there was MKUltra, the infamous mind control program. From the 1950s to the 70s, the CIA conducted secret, often non-consensual experiments on American and Canadian citizens, using hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and drugs like LSD to see if they could control the human mind. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's a documented historical fact, revealed by congressional investigations in the 1970s. The pursuit of global influence also led to direct intervention in foreign governments. In 1953, the CIA orchestrated a coup in Iran to overthrow the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who had nationalized the country's oil industry. The following year, they did the same in Guatemala, overthrowing President Jacobo Arbenz to protect the interests of the United Fruit Company. These actions installed pro-American dictators and sowed instability that has had lasting consequences for decades. The Vietnam War further exposed the dark side of American foreign policy. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was used to justify a massive escalation of the war, was later revealed to be based on misleading, if not entirely false, information. The war dragged on for years, costing over 58,000 American lives and millions of Vietnamese lives, and deeply divided the nation. The revelation of atrocities like the My Lai massacre shattered the public's trust in the government and the military. From the brutal realities of its founding to the secret wars and covert operations of the Cold War, the history of the United States is far more complex and troubling than the simple narrative of freedom and democracy. It's a story of incredible achievement and innovation, but also one of conquest, oppression, and moral compromise. Understanding this full picture, with all its uncomfortable truths, is essential to understanding the America of today. The past is never truly past, and its shadows continue to shape the present. So, what do you think? Did you learn any of this in your history class? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more of the hidden stories that shaped our world, make sure you subscribe to the Infographic Show and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks for watching.